Hi everyone, this is Scott Hicks and Jeremy Quick back to do some more investigations of spiritualization of thinking, philosophy of freedom work that's related to our ongoing work with cognitive yoga in the Global Event College and the Independent High School of Spiritual Science. And we wanted to continue with our investigation of the philosophy of freedom by Rudolf Steiner, and today we would like to focus on the issue of moral intuition and trying to understand the difference between a motive and a driving force, and looking at a real example from our lives.
Yeah. In the last video, we were able to experience this state of consciousness or intuition that revealed to us that we are not actually in our bodies only subjective beings that are trapped here, and we have no access to any reality except our representations, and our knowledge is just mirroring the world, unknown world outside. And we can ask, even if we experience that self-sustaining spiritual activity, what does it have to do with our daily life, our life of action? And that leads to the question, is there a possibility to be free? Because of the spiritual activity we experienced can be experienced as a free becoming process of my spiritual individuality. But still there's a long bridge if, and this is what we want to investigate today, we can actually bring that freedom of becoming into the freedom of living here and now. So the spirituality isn't something that is detached from the reality, but is actually something that could provide our reality here and now, something that makes the whole process meaningful. Otherwise I can just meditate there and be here stupid smart ass or anything else I want to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, is there a connection between our highest spiritual activity that is realized and unveiled through intuitive thinking and our everyday earthly life, or is it totally disconnected? So this is what we're investigating, and this is really a question of morality. How do I live and act in a good way in the world?
Yeah.
So we would like to take a look at a few quotes from Rudolf Steiner from The Philosophy of Freedom. And I never can remember the chapters. What chapter is this?
So it's Philosophy of Freedom is divided in two halves. The first half was the ding, which we experimented yesterday with, meaning knowing or intuiting the self. And the second part, which we are now experimenting with, starts with chapter 8, and now we take the chapter 9, that is the most badass chapter in the book, the most difficult labyrinths you can find there. So let's just, give it a humble try.
Okay. Here is a quote from chapter 9 of The Philosophy of Freedom, or The Philosophy of Spiritual Activity. Quote, "The human organism is the foundation of the I consciousness. It is also the source of will activity. Then we're skipping a sentence. The factors to be considered in a particular act of will are the motive and the driving force. The motive is either a concept or a representation. The driving force is the will element and is directly conditioned by the human organism. A motive of will may be a pure concept or a concept with a definite reference to what is perceived, in other words, a representation. And finally, I'll just skip a few sentences where Steiner says, but one and the same concept or one and the same representation influences different individuals differently. So maybe first we could try to clarify, simplify, and activate what Steiner's talking about here by the human organism, the I consciousness, motive, and driving force.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. And hardcore. That's the way we like it.
Yeah. So, to me, the thing that requires the most clarification is when I'm going to act. Why do I do action X? Why do I do action Y? Why did I choose to do action Z rather than action A? So what were the reasons that led me to perform this action, and what were the impulses that I felt inside myself that urged me to go in this direction?
So, for example, everyone can ask, why did we choose to watch this video? Was there, as Steiner called it, representation, a mental image, or idea that we saw or intuit in our mind's eye, saying, for example, this is something I want to watch, this is something meaningful. Was there feeling that arised in us saying or experimenting like, there are some nice things I can learn if I watch that video? Was it just the instinct you saw how beautiful these guys are, or how
beautiful the hats are? You see the hat and immediately
exactly
you hit the play button.
Or was there a logical thought, anthroposophy, philosophy of freedom, these boys, world must be better place if I know how to use moral intuition, so let me press the button? Or was there something that was none of these, but only through the spiritual activity itself?
Mm-hmm.
I know I went now Scott can hold me down because I'm in a...
No, I think those are good examples. A good example because we're talking about something that each person is engaged with here. So what is leading us to do any particular action? Is there the possibility of a motive for an action being this experience of self-sustaining intuitive activity, which is not related to anything I've experienced in the past, in a memory, that's not an immediate instinctual draw towards something that I see this beautiful thing in the world and I want to possess it, but to awaken the I consciousness in the human organism, to awaken this thinker that's so fast that it's on the scene before subjectivity is set up, before objectivity is set up, before concepts of inner and outer are set up, and it's able to act. It's able to act in this space, as we demonstrated in our last video.
Because if we act according to the logical thinking, daily logical thinking, anthroposophy is better than watching Kim Kardashian, or the feelings that are coming for us when we are deciding to act, or just the instincts. Oh, these guys have like Pikachu hats, we must see it. All of these factors are in a similar way given from outside, saying that it's not through our own freedom to have that act, but it is because of we are accustomed to have sympathy, and we are accustomed to press the button when we have sympathy. So we are in a similar way looking, like Scott said, that free thinker who is able not only become itself through its free decision, but also to act from that plane that is before subject and object, space and time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, and the third element that Rudolf Steiner mentions here is what he calls, by this strange name, characterological disposition. But we can just say, why is it that this particular video or this particular thing I see in the world, how did it act? What did it link up with in me? My own habits, my own biography, what allowed it to interact with my overall character and habits that led me to actually push the play button, or buy this particular T-shirt, or buy this particular book, or do anything, go on a trip. So it could be that the same concept or the same mental image would affect Jeremy in a different way than it would affect me. So the same concept might move him to press the play button on a particular video, and the same concept might influence me in a different way, and I might choose to not watch it.
And I just wanted to mention the idea that if we never built this, if there's a possibility of becoming free in a way that we can determine our own moral intuition, moral action, if we always follow our logical thoughts, our feelings, even feeling intuitions, or our instincts, I remain bound and imprisoned by my subjectivity, my personality, and my personality, which is always influenced by the worldview, friends, materialistic thoughts, spiritualistic thoughts. I become determined being, and this is something that we can experience our daily life. That, for example, there's a trend of having cell phones. That's an old one, but in any case, there comes something that is popular, and people are just adapting that as their own truth, whereas actually they went just to, they in they got a new habit, which is now part of their characterological disposition. Someone says, let's build a wall between Mexico and USA, and some people have just that feeling that, yeah, this is a good thing, and now this is their own truth, they think. But do you see, we are again in this labyrinth. So we are in the labyrinth of how can we act freely. So do you wanna start to?
Yeah, let's look at a particular example. So the example we picked out was what?
Yesterday's video we did yesterday had the idea that I was slowing myself down whereas normally when we work together with Scott I would go faster with him and open these boundaries of higher status of consciousness.
Right, so the question we're going to ask, we're going to investigate in a living way is, can we find the driving forces, the impulses that led us to adopt this plan of action for the last video? What were the motives, the concepts, the representations that led us to do that? And then we could ask the question, what kind of character do you possess that allowed this to actually result in a course of action? And then let's see if we can find the way out of the labyrinth. Can there be an event which is opened up out of this process, which shows us the way to moral intuition, to a free activity that's not bound by these other elements?
And anyone can do that. This with their own situation. So you don't need to just listen our bullshit about our, most difficult decision, but you can take your own any situation in life, right? And see why did I act the way I acted.
Yeah, right. So why did I eat that piece of cake? Why did I open the refrigerator door at this time? Why did I go to work this morning? Why did I watch that horrific film on Netflix? I won't mention its name. Why did I do anything?
All right. So let's start by I'm still describing the situation so we can start to enliven the labyrinth, or at least experience it more consciously. I was sitting here on the other's bench, stool, whatever. Scott was sitting here. I remember what Scott said about his having keys to unlock the doors away to open himself from the labyrinth. And when we started to experiment with the concept or the experiences how we see the world, I chose to remain step by step as simple as possible, saying that when Scott was opening the doors to Thinker, I was still experimenting with how do I know that a shirt Scott was wearing is a shirt, t-shirt, and what is the concept of t-shirt? And when Scott went again to the higher state of consciousness, I remain back, even though I could have gone in principle with him and open those passages.
Okay, great. So can we separate off the thinking, feeling, the willing elements that were present there, the elements of the driving force. What kind of elements were and impulses were working in you there?
Okay. I remember when Scott started to go faster. There came in me almost like unconscious block. I felt that my thinking is not going to follow his. It wasn't thought, it wasn't felt, it was just a constant movement, a similar way as if there is a red light that turns from the green light, when you are walking across the street, and I just stop. It was that similar kind of experience of the red light, and here I was. And then feelings and thoughts came.
Okay, so something from the outside you felt was stopping you, something that you didn't determine yourself, something you ran up against, and you recognized it was blocking your will impulse in a way, and you became conscious of it.
So I would say it's an instinct. The next one, I could have gone further. I could have joined him again. But then there came this idea that I remembered that through working in videos, shooting these kind of videos, and also working with Scott, that there was this idea that I want to go step by step. I want to go slowly. And also there came our dear friend, mentor, Jesai's voice, who said, "Term, you should be slowly," and slow Scott down at times. So all these things came to my head like as an automatic thing, but I was able to kind of set my mind again to be slow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you essentially were receiving immediate representations that came from your past experience, which operated as motives for you to perform this kind of action in the video. So you received the representation of Yeshayahu sending us a message saying, hey, try to keep Scott tied to the earth, make him go step by step a bit more. It makes things more understandable. And you had, you also had, though, didn't you, a feeling of wanting the process to be as helpful as possible to the people that are watching? Was that an element in your?
I was more thought-like, but there was, now when you are mentioning it, there was a sympathetic feeling towards the people who are watching the video, and there was also antipathetic feeling towards Scott, because he went so many times faster, and I had this come on, didn't you already learn that in the first 2-3 times, and I needed to be even more slowly. So that kind of antipathy even kind of strengthened my being a dump. I'm still in this realm of t-shirts. It was kind of like slapping him a little bit in the face. So I admit being a little bit a-hole here.
Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, I think that's part of the process of uncovering these aspects which come so quickly into our into our day-to-day experience, and we find these elements in us. We find these hidden elements, and that's part of this process. Can we find what's really motivating us to do action X or Y? These are oftentimes totally unconscious, half conscious, based on feeling. So you had a sympathetic feeling and an antipathetic feeling. So what if both of those were operating, and you had these representations in the ideal realm and the instinct coming from the blockage? Which one? Why did this feeling of sympathy toward a particular process lead you to actually perform the action? Because you might not have performed the action, or if I were doing it, I would have kept on going as fast as possible. You know, if it had interacted with my character. So can you locate some of those elements?
When I'm reflecting now, okay, the first of all, it feels almost like impossible mission to see all this happening in every moment in me, and how less conscious I am in my any decision. How did I choose to say these words now? Like, it needs a muscle, I think, to be able to observe these in the first place, and that I think that's what we are doing here. But to go back to the process, I had like 3-4 times I could make a decision of going faster. And these 3 ways, sympathy and antipathy, and my instincts and my logical thinking, was like blocking each time my going faster. But if you are asking me, like, was there anything else that was being played? How can I find that?
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that if we look at the characterological disposition element for a moment, I think that can help out, because I'm recognizing, as you're gently separating off these elements, carefully dissecting your own nature, your own organism as a whole, your own soul being, I realize that in me, the reason why I end up let's say going a bit faster, making larger jumps, is in a way because in my character, and also in the way that my habits of thinking, I oftentimes feel like it's so important to open up these spiritually intuitive landscapes, that to me is the highest goal that I want to pass on to other people, and I feel like that's a place where that's my forte. And I think that I feel also that this is of the most help to the viewers and to an audience that happens to be watching us, or when we're working in groups with people in our school and college events. But that's my character. That's my character, and those motives and driving forces and my feelings. It's really connected with my whole feeling nature of this is what I feel in my sympathetic aspect to be the most fruitful thing. So I go down this path, and it's also totally habitual that this is easy for me. So this is the path. This is the bicycle path that I ride down again and again. But I'm noticing that in your character, in the way that you compose your habits of thought and feeling, that you have a very strong sense for what is most helpful for, let's say, a beginner or a person that's not had a lot of experience with, let's say, philosophical thinking, speaking. You've spoken to a lot of different people in a lot of different venues all over the world, especially in Finland, and so you, I think, have a sense of how to connect with a large group of people, and people that may not be so conversant with the approach that my kind of narrow approach in a way. So this allowed you to make a different decision than I would have made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that part of it? I'm seeing that. I mean, your search helped me understand my own setup.
Okay. I want to be now careful. I just wanted to mention that yes, that's true. That in a way, Scott and me have opposite stage of importance. I want to go step by step as clearly as possible from the beginning, always without preconceived knowledge into the experience, where Scott is coming from an other side, almost like from opposite side, so he's opened the view of the possible experience that can help people to understand where we are going towards to. So we are kind of also, I think, balancing each other here.
Mm-hmm.
But just wanted to say, now the real thing that came from hearing you was that I could a little bit see me and you as an equal from outside. So way now we are investigating this process gives me a little bit substance to stand outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you experience that as well?
Yes, I do. To look at ourselves a little bit as a stranger, as Rudolf Steiner suggests to do in Knowledge of Higher Worlds, Chapter 1, in a really fruitful practice, not in a abstract way, but in a real way, to get a little bit of distance from our own labyrinth, from our own earthly nature and composition. And so you digging through these elements of factors, driving forces, motives, and your own habits, that allowed me to also dig simultaneously because we were doing it together. It's not you just sitting in your room doing it randomly, or but it's the fact that it's a group process. So likewise, I feel that I was able to see my own nature reflected in your digging process. And now, if I could say, you see it as well. I see there's a little, here's the opening.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that this is the transition zone.
Exactly.
This is the place where we come up against the threshold, where we could then move into what's really active in the philosophy of spiritual activity that Steiner created. And we have now created our own path to it, where we see, okay, now if I set all those elements aside, there is the possibility of acting from this a little bit impersonal, creative thinking space, where I see, oh my gosh, I could have made decisions based on this element that's looking at my own self as a stranger, that's looking a little bit free of our labyrinth and our habits as we work on it together, and that could be a really inspiring source of activity. So please continue.
Yeah, I'm not stopping.
Hold me back.
I'm not stopping.
I'll hold you back. No, wait. Let's slow down.
The element that we are here together and we can observe ourselves as a stranger, I can also relate to our experiment, our video from yesterday. If I see myself and Scott as a stranger there, I intuit the idea that it is not only me and him, or Jeremy and Scott, but also everyone who is watching the video, as also today. So the wholeness or the experience becomes Jeremy, Scott, and everyone else sharing this space together. And here we are now standing in the threshold of this unknown yet known spiritual activity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when Scott opened the way and went there, I went there, and now I want to go there again, saying that it's not about me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's about us, and now I'm saying in the largest sense, us as this element of light, this wisdom we experienced yesterday, I'm experiencing now, that through my action here can shed light to this daily realm of unknowing or unconscious not knowing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And from this vantage point where it's really related to the heart, so it's a zone where we can't so easily just take our subjective needs and yearnings across to become a power broker in this new spiritual landscape, but rather there's a humble waiting and a patience here, where I do find the source of my own soul and my own spirit as a shining light, self-reflecting, self-creative eye, which has a free zone, which is free, which is able to produce its own activity and create its own structures and interpretations. But here also we're in cooperation, not only with each other and with the whole world that we're bound to, that we're woven to, that we're floating in, that we're swimming in, but also with the soul and spiritual beings who are co-creating with us in this process. And that has to bring about a moral sense. So that's why it's not just intuition of concepts, but when you see the concepts are spiritual beings, then we recognize that we're in a co-creative process that is it has to be give and take, and but that's the wonderful part about it.
Yeah. So it gives me a great sense of responsibility. What do I do if and when I'm awakened here? My heart feels it, and it's now the experience is like very tender mood, knowing that what I intuit now in a way changes the whole reality from the perspective of me. And when this new reality comes down into our daily life, it can change the way I see Scott, the way I see my personality, the way and there's only one word that comes to my mind, it's love. The way I can, through love, which I'm experiencing now, intuit something that is not selfish, because from this perspective there is no more importance on my behalf than Scott's behalf or from anyone's behalf, because this everything here is part of the same reality, and is part of the same reality that life, this life and light and love is. So maybe, I've heard this once, I need to restate it, maybe the spiritual world gave us power not only to actualize ourselves as a free spiritual beings, but to also to bring that through that act down and up, but down into action, something that continues the evolution of humanity. And we are standing here experiencing that intuition of action through freedom and love for the sake of whole humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that says it all. That says it all, really. And this is the place where, if we can act from this place, we can bring nourishment back to our earthly experience. Then we live in our earthly experience, and we bring nourishment back to this intuitive, spiritually intuitive perspective. And the spiritual world works on our transformed ideas and habits and actions and concepts, and they bestow something on us in a creative act, and then we work with it on the earth and give it back and forth. So it's this is what you can find in Yeshayahu Ben Haron's books, The New Experience of the Supersensible, Cognitive Yoga, Spiritual Event in the 20th Century, the event in Science, History, Philosophy, and Art, and even in his forthcoming book, Jerusalem. These are all elements which are described there with infinite detail. And it's what Yeshayahu means by that the earth is becoming a new sun, that the sun forces are creative inside the earth itself, and the earth is becoming a new place. Yeah. So thanks a lot, Jeremy, for going on this journey with me, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. All the best.
Farewell.